Some schools close because they are old. Some close because they are unsafe. And some because a lesson was never allowed to end. This is the story of a female teacher who died unjustly. A school with no name. A classroom that never dismissed its students. Listen carefully. Because once the lesson begins, it remembers who you are. Chapter 1. The Nameless School. The school stood at the far edge of the town, where the asphalt roads slowly gave way to red dirt and rows of banana trees grew so thick they seemed to hide something behind them. There was no sign bearing the school's name. People said the sign had been taken down years ago, after an incident that was better left unmentioned. Since then, locals referred to the place only in vague terms, that school. By day, the school looked old but ordinary. Weeds crept across the courtyard. Green paint peeled from the window frames. And the classrooms lay silent, as if trapped in an endless afternoon nap. But when the sun went down, darkness did not fall from the sky, it rose from the ground itself. From the long corridors where the dim yellow lights failed to reach every corner. No one in town walked past the school after 9 at night. People believed that if you slowed your steps near the rusted iron gate, you would hear the sound of chalk scraping against a blackboard, dry, steady, like a teacher carefully writing a lesson. The problem was that there were no night classes anymore. No teachers on duty. No students. Former night guards all quit without explanation. Some claimed they heard a soft voice carried by the wind, whispering, "Have you come to class yet?" Others swore that whenever they passed the second-floor hallway, their necks felt unbearably heavy, as if someone were standing just behind them. Every morning, classroom 6/3 showed the same strange sign. The blackboard had been wiped clean the night before. Yet when students entered, a sentence would already be written there in white chalk, in a gentle, feminine handwriting. "I am still teaching." No one admitted to writing it. No camera ever captured the moment the words appeared. And the strangest thing of all was this. The handwriting was identical to that of someone who was already dead. The school had no name. But it had never truly been silent. Chapter 2. Teacher Anong. No one at the school ever called her by her last name. The students simply called her Teacher Anong. The familiarity of it always made her smile, even though there was a constant weariness in her eyes. Anong arrived at school earlier than anyone else and was always the last to leave. Long after the courtyard had fallen silent, a single yellow light would still glow in the teacher's room. She taught Thai language, but what she taught her students went beyond words. Anong believed that handwriting had a soul, that if you wrote carefully, you would learn to live carefully as well. She corrected every crooked letter, every misplaced tone mark, with a patience that some colleagues mocked as being too strict with poor children. Anong lived alone in a small wooden house near the temple. No husband, no children, no scandals. Her life revolved around the school, the temple, and the stacks of notebooks she carried home each night to grade. But it was precisely that quiet routine that allowed her to see what others chose not to see. She noticed the altered grades, test papers that had been subtly erased and rewritten, names that rose on the score sheets not because of effort, but because envelopes had been slipped under certain desks. Anong did not speak out immediately. She watched, she recorded, and then, on a heavy rainy afternoon, she wrote a formal complaint. From that day on, the atmosphere at school changed. Looks grew colder. Morning greetings disappeared. Conversations in the teacher's room fell silent whenever Anong walked in. Someone warned her that she should think about her own safety. She only lowered her head and continued grading papers. That night, Anong stayed at school very late. Rain pounded the roof, thunder cracking close overhead. Near 10 o'clock, she received a message asking her to go to the principal's office to clear up a few misunderstandings. The hallway was dark, the lights flickering, her footsteps echoed. Alone. No one knows exactly what happened inside that room. All that is known is that Anong never walked out again. And from that night on, the school was no longer able to sleep in peace. Chapter 3. A death without a clear cause. The rain had stopped by morning, yet the air inside the school felt heavy, as if something had been pressed down there all night and never lifted. The one who discovered Anong's body was an elderly janitor, when he unlocked the storage room behind the old classroom block. The moment the door opened, A damp, moldy stench mixed with something metallic rushed out and caught in his throat. Anong lay on her back on the cold concrete floor. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the stained ceiling above. Her collar had been pulled askew, exposing a dark purple bruise around her neck, clear and unmistakable, like the mark of something that had tightened there. Several of her fingernails were broken, crusted with dried blood. Across the floor ran a long smear, dragged from the doorway inward, as though she had tried to crawl away in desperation. Yet no one called the police right away. Within minutes, the administration sealed off the area. Whispers spread quickly. She was emotionally unstable. Female teachers often crack under pressure. Work stress can do terrible things. By the time the ambulance arrived, the body had already been covered with a white sheet, and the scene had been wiped clean with unsettling efficiency. The official report stated, suicide due to psychological distress. There was no autopsy, no investigation into the bruises on her neck, no explanation for the blood beneath her nails, or the deep scratch marks carved into the wall under the storage table, marks that looked like someone had clung to life until the very last second. The students of class 6/3 were told that teacher Anong had transferred to another school. But on the blackboard, her writing from the night before had not been fully erased. The lesson ended abruptly. The final stroke of chalk stretched unnaturally long, trembling at the end. That night, the night guard heard a sound coming from classroom 6/3. When he opened the door to check, the blackboard was completely clean. Then, under the dim light, new words slowly appeared, written not in white chalk, but in something darker. I haven't gone anywhere. From that moment on, Anong's death was no longer just a death. It became something buried. And things that are buried always find a way back. Chapter 4. The Class Without a Teacher. Class 6/3 went nearly a full week without a new homeroom teacher after Anong's death. The school said they were rearranging staff. But everyone knew the truth. No one wanted that class. Empty periods became more frequent, especially in the late afternoons. That afternoon, class 6/3 sat quietly in the stifling heat. The ceiling fan creaked overhead. There was no teacher, no lesson. A few students whispered among themselves. Others bent over their desks, doodling aimlessly. The wall clock ticked in a strange, uneven rhythm, the second hand seeming to hesitate, as if caught on a single moment. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. They were not heavy, not hurried, just steady, and so familiar that several students straightened their backs without knowing why. Hands moved instinctively onto desks. The murmurs died away. The classroom door did not open, but the footsteps stopped right outside. The sound of chalk touched the board. Tap, scrape. White marks began to appear on the blackboard at the front of the room. Line by line, as though an invisible hand were writing. No one dared to stand. No one dared to scream. Because the handwriting, it was unmistakably teacher Anong's. Rounded, gentle, careful to every accent mark. A voice followed, very soft, yet clear in the closed room. Open your notebooks. The voice came from no single direction. It seemed to brush past each student's ear. A few began to cry silently. Others, trembling, obeyed on instinct, opening their notebooks as they had done countless times before. The lesson continued for a full period. No teacher could be seen. Yet everything unfolded exactly as it had when Anong was alive, the pace of writing, the pauses at certain sentences, even her habit of stopping longer when a student made a mistake. When the dismissal bell rang, the blackboard went blank in an instant. No writing, no trace, only one small sentence remained in the lower corner. Do not stand up until I allow it. One student stood before the bell had fully faded. That night, the child complained of severe pain in the neck and could no longer bend their head. Doctors found no injury. But on the child's neck appeared a faint purple mark, shaped exactly like fingers. From that day on, no one in class 6/3 ever thought of a free period as good fortune again. Chapter 5. The Face on the Blackboard. Not every student in class 6/3 was afraid. There were still some who believed everything was nothing more than a collective prank, or a story exaggerated to scare children. Among them was Prasit, a troublesome boy who had often been reprimanded by teacher Anong when she was still alive. During an empty afternoon period, While the class sat in tense silence, Prasit let out a scoff. He picked up a piece of chalk and turned toward the blackboard. "So where is she?" he said, half mocking, half defiant. "Come out and teach, then." And Prasit began to draw. Not words, but a distorted face, oversized eyes, a mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, the neck elongated unnaturally. Several students shouted for him to stop. Prasit ignored them, adding more chaotic lines, as if deliberately mocking someone who could no longer defend herself. The moment the chalk left the board, the air in the classroom dropped cold. The ceiling fan slowed, then stopped, though the switch was still on. The blackboard trembled slightly, letting out a faint scraping sound, like teeth grinding together. The face Prasit had drawn began to change. The smile vanished first, the eyes were erased, leaving two hollow, black pits. The chalk lines dragged downward, tightening around the neck, forming a clear strangulation mark. No one breathed. Prasit stood frozen, chalk still in his hand, his fingers shaking uncontrollably. A sentence appeared beneath the face, written slowly, stroke by stroke. "I can see you." That night, Prasit burned with a high fever. He raved in his sleep, begging forgiveness from someone who was not in the room. His mother said he kept clawing at his own neck, crying over and over, "I won't laugh anymore, please stop looking at me." The next morning, Prasit did not come to school. When the students of class 6/3 entered the classroom, the blackboard had been wiped clean, but at its center was a new drawing, a woman's face. Long hair covering half of it, her neck tilted at an unnatural angle. There were no eyes, no mouth, only a deep, dark line across the throat. From that day on, no one dared touch the blackboard in class 6/3 again, because they understood now. The teacher was not only teaching. She was remembering every face that had ever mocked her. Chapter 6. The Third Night Guard. The third night guard was named Somchai. He had been hired after the previous two guards quit without explanation. In his 40s, Somchai had worked security at construction sites before and did not believe in ghosts. When he heard the whispers around town about class 6/3, he only scoffed. If ghosts were real, he said, they'd be afraid of the living. His first night shift passed quietly. Wind rustled through the banana trees, sending dry leaves skittering across the yard. The corridor lights on the second floor stayed on without flickering. Close to 11 o'clock, Somchai heard someone crying. It was not loud, not sobbing, just a restrained, broken sound, drifting from the direction of classroom 6/3. Somchai picked up his flashlight and climbed the stairs. With every step, the cold crept further up his spine. When he reached the classroom door, the crying stopped. The door stood slightly ajar. A weak, yellowish light seeping through the crack, like an oil lamp about to go out. He pushed the door open. Inside the classroom stood a woman with her back to him. She wore a pale teacher's uniform, the hem brushing the floor. Her long black hair fell straight down, completely covering her neck. She stood very still, facing the blackboard. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Somchai asked. The woman did not answer. He took another step forward. A damp, metallic smell filled the room, drying his throat. As he reached out to touch her shoulder, she slowly turned her head. There was no complete face. Her neck was bent sharply to one side, the skin dark and bruised, marked clearly by strangulation. Her mouth hung slightly open, as if trying to speak, but no sound came out, only a wet, rasping breath from deep in her throat. Somchai stumbled backward and fell. When he looked up again, the classroom was empty. No woman, no light, only the blackboard remained, covered in frantic, overlapping writing, the same sentence repeated again and again. "Why did no one listen to me?" The next morning, Somchai handed in his resignation. When asked for a reason, he said nothing. Only when he passed through the school gate did he whisper, as if to himself, "She didn't kill herself." From that day on, no one dared take the night shift at the school again, and those who knew the truth began to understand. The teacher had begun to demand answers. Chapter 7. The Mirror in the Teacher's Room. The teacher's room sat at the end of the old building, where the light was always dimmer than everywhere else. On the wall opposite the door hung a large mirror in a dark wooden frame, cracked by a thin line at the upper corner. No one remembered when it had been placed there. It simply had always been there. After Somchai resigned, the atmosphere in the teacher's room grew heavy. Those who had signed the report on Anong's death avoided each other's eyes. No one spoke her name. Yet whenever someone stood before the mirror to straighten their clothes, they all felt the same thing. Someone was standing very close behind them. Malini, a female teacher, was the first to experience it. She had stayed late one evening to prepare lesson plans. As she stood before the mirror, she noticed that her reflection was not quite right. In the glass, her collar was pulled aside, revealing a dark bruise slowly forming around her neck, though her real skin showed nothing at all. Malini raised her hand to touch her throat. In the mirror, her hand did not make contact. It was held back. Behind her reflection, another figure appeared, a woman in a teacher's uniform. Her face was pale, her eyes sunk in deep into their sockets. Her neck tilted to one side as if it could no longer support her head. The woman did not touch Malini. She only stood close and whispered, her voice hoarse and dry. "You stayed silent." Malini collapsed to the floor. After that incident, no one dared look into the mirror alone. But the mirror no longer needed anyone standing in front of it to do its work. Some teachers swore that after school hours, names appeared on the glass by themselves. The names of those who had signed off on the words, "suicide." Beneath each name was a faint handprint, placed exactly where a human neck would be. One night, the janitor found the mirror completely fogged over. Even though the room was dry, on the misty surface, a sentence had been written with a fingertip. "I saw everything." The next morning, the mirror was covered with a white cloth, but no one dared remove it, because those who suggested taking it down all shared the same dream. They stood in the dark teacher's room, facing the mirror, and in the reflection, they had no necks. From that night on, those who had once chosen silence began to understand. The teacher had not returned just to haunt them. She had returned to force them to look directly at what had killed her. Chapter 8. The Curse of the Grades. The grade books were sealed away in the administration office. The school claimed it was to stabilize the situation, but everyone understood the real reason. They were afraid of touching the past. Not long after, the students whose grades had been quietly raised began to suffer strange misfortunes. Not all at once, not in the same way, but all of them shared one thing in common. No one could explain what was happening. Niran was the first. He had always struggled academically, yet his recent test scores were unnaturally high. One morning, during a reading exercise, he stared blankly at the page in front of him. The letters blurred, as if dissolving into water. He rubbed his eyes and tried again, still nothing. Though he had once read fluently, he could no longer recognize a single word. Doctors found nothing wrong with his eyes, nothing wrong with his brain, but when he held a pen, his hand shook so violently that he could not even write his own name. The next morning, a line appeared in Niran's notebook, written in a dark reddish-brown ink, like old blood. "This grade was never yours." Then there was Molly. She had benefited from altered scores in Thai class. During recess, she slipped on the stairs, a minor fall, hardly worth attention, but her neck twisted sharply to one side, locked in place. At the hospital, X-rays showed no broken bones. Only a faint bruise appeared, exactly where a hand would fit when gripping a throat. More cases followed. One student could no longer pronounce words properly. Another lost their voice whenever it was time to read aloud. Some woke in the middle of the night screaming, dreaming that they were sitting in class 6/3, staring at a blackboard filled with grades, each number stretching longer and longer until it turned into a cord tightening around their necks. Teachers grew afraid of grading papers. Numbers on the pages seemed to change by themselves. One teacher swore she had given a low score, only to find a high one written there the next morning, with a faint handprint smudged along the edge of the paper. In class 6/3, the blackboard once again displayed the familiar handwriting, neat and merciless. "I am only returning what was taken." From that moment on, no one dared ask for their grades to be raised. No one dared open the old record books. But it was already too late. Because once dishonesty had been written down, the teacher would be the one to assign the final grade. Chapter 9. The Night with No Shadow. The full moon arrived without warning. Not because anyone had forgotten the date, but because the moonlight that night felt wrong, pale and dull. As if filtered through an invisible veil, the schoolyard lay submerged in a cold glow, the shadows of trees stretching unnaturally long across the cracked concrete. Security cameras were installed after the incidents, a desperate attempt by the administration to regain control. They believed machines would provide certainty. Instead, the cameras recorded something no one could deny. At exactly midnight, every light in the school went out at once. All except one. The old classroom block on the second floor suddenly lit up, a dim yellow glow spilling from class 6/3. Camera number 4 turned toward it on its own, without any manual input. On the screen, the classroom door slowly opened. No one entered, yet the desks inside began to move, scraping softly across the floor, arranging themselves into neat rows, one by one, as if guided by invisible hands. A figure gradually appeared on the teacher's platform. It was a woman. She stood upright, wearing an old teacher's uniform. The hem of her dress did not stir, even though the windows were wide open. Her face was hidden behind a curtain of hair. When she stepped forward, the camera shook slightly. What chilled the viewers most was this: she cast no shadow. The blackboard behind her began to glow faintly as moonlight slanted through the windows. Lines of writing appeared clearly, and the woman began to teach, facing rows of empty desks. Her mouth moved, forming words, but no sound was captured by the microphone. The camera continued recording until clouds slid across the moon. In that instant of total darkness, the woman slowly turned her head and looked straight into the lens. Her face remained unclear, but her neck was painfully visible, tilted sharply to one side. Dark bruises wrapping around it, distorted as if frozen at the moment of death. The next morning, when the administration reviewed the footage, camera number 4 had burned out. The circuit was dead, but the final frame remained intact. On the blackboard, in the last image, only one sentence could be seen, written large and deliberate: "I am not finished teaching." From that night on, no one doubted that the school had been claimed. And whatever remained there had no shadow under the moon. Chapter 10. The mother WHO came searching. She came to the school late in the afternoon, when the sunlight had already faded behind the rows of banana trees. The woman was thin, her back slightly bent, her hands holding a bundle of incense sticks and an old cloth bag. No one needed to ask who she was. Everyone knew. She was Anong's mother. The school had advised her not to return. They said everything was already over, that her daughter's death was something no one had wanted. But the mother did not believe them. She could not believe that a daughter who had been gentle all her life, who could not even bring herself to harm an ant, would choose to die alone like that. She asked to enter class 6/3, the last classroom where Anong had taught. Inside the silent room, dust lay thick on the desks. The mother knelt before the teacher's platform and lit 3 sticks of incense. The smoke rose slowly, curling through the cold air. She called out softly, the way she used to call her daughter home for dinner. "Anong, are you here?" A breeze stirred, though the windows were closed. The incense smoke twisted, then drifted toward the blackboard. From behind her came a faint sound, broken breathing, like someone struggling to hold back pain. "Mother." The voice was weak, painfully familiar. Her heart clenched. She turned around. No one was there. But on the wall, at the height of an adult's neck, dark purple marks appeared, 5 clear fingerprints, as if someone had been violently grabbed. The blackboard began to fill with writing, stroke by trembling stroke, no longer neat like before. "I'm in so much pain." The mother broke down, her forehead pressed to the floor. She apologized for not protecting her child, for believing the signatures on those papers, for letting her daughter die in silence. Behind her, a shape slowly formed, a woman in a teacher's uniform, her neck bent at an unnatural angle, her long hair hanging loose. She was not terrifying, only unbearably sorrowful. The figure lowered herself and pressed her forehead gently against the mother's. The room grew colder. When the mother left the school after nightfall, those watching from a distance swore they saw 2 figures walking side by side along the second-floor corridor, one old, one young. That night, the blackboard in class 6/3 displayed a new sentence, written slowly and deeply. I was not allowed to die like this. From that moment on, what was happening was no longer just a curse. It became a demand for justice. Chapter 11. The Buried Truth. The truth does not rise on its own. It is pushed up by those who can no longer bear its weight. The first to collapse was Prisha, the teacher in charge of academic records. He was a quiet man, always lowering his head before the administration. After the night Anong's mother left the school, Prisha began drinking heavily. He said he could not sleep anymore, that whenever he closed his eyes, he saw a dark room, smelled dampness in the air, and heard a woman struggling to breathe. In a drunken haze, Prisha finally spoke the truth he had kept buried for so long. Anong had not killed herself. She had been summoned to the principal's office for a final discussion. Words turned into threats. When Anong said she would send her complaint beyond the school, someone grabbed her arms, someone covered her mouth, and someone tightened their hands around her neck. No one had planned to kill her that night, but when Anong collapsed and stopped breathing, they chose silence. Her body was moved, the report was rewritten, the word suicide was signed off faster than a prayer. That same night Prisha confessed. He was found hanging in his office. The door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle. Yet the mark around his neck did not resemble a rope. It looked like fingerprints. On the wall, written in a dark, sticky substance, were crooked words. I never told you to speak. After that death, panic spread among those who remained. The administration held secret meetings, shifting blame from one to another. Some requested transfers, others suddenly took sick leave. But wherever they went, Class 6/3 followed them into their sleep. They dreamed of Anong standing in the dark storage room. Her neck was bent sharply to one side, her eyes wide open, unblinking. She did not accuse, she did not scream, she only asked one question, over and over. Why did no one listen to me? Each time they woke, their necks ached, as if someone had rested a hand there for a very long time. People say that when the truth is buried deep enough, it will always find the shortest way back, through the deaths of those who buried it. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 12. The Abandoned School. The decision to close the school was made faster than any investigation. The official reason given was structural safety concerns. But everyone knew the truth had nothing to do with cracked walls or rusted roofs. Within a single week, desks were covered with tarps, files were transferred elsewhere, and the iron gate was chained shut with thick locks. People withdrew. But the school did not die. Residents living nearby began to notice strange things. At night, a weak yellow light still glowed from the abandoned buildings, even though the electricity had been cut. Some heard the school bell ring at the exact hour of dismissal. Others claimed they saw a figure standing motionless in the second-floor corridor, upright and watching the courtyard below. No one dared to approach. A group of young men once climbed over the gate out of curiosity. They returned in panic, swearing that classes were still being held inside. The desks were neatly arranged. The blackboard was filled with writing, and there was the sound of a lesson being read aloud, steady, hollow, as if coming from a throat that no longer belonged to the living. They said that when they looked into classroom 6/3, they saw figures seated at the desks. All of them bowed their heads. All of them were trembling. None of them had faces, only faint human shapes, barely formed. On the teacher's platform stood a woman, her neck bent sharply to one side, her voice so hoarse it barely sounded human. After that night, one of the young men lost his ability to speak. His neck stiffened, locked in place. Whenever he tried to make a sound, only a wet, rasping breath escaped, like someone who had been strangled for far too long. The villagers began leaving offerings at the school gate. Incense, flowers, paper money. Yet every night, the wind extinguished the incense. And every morning, wet footprints appeared on the ground, leading from inside the courtyard to the fence, then stopping abruptly, as if something had wanted to leave but was not allowed to. In classroom 6/3, the blackboard continued to change by itself. Once every month, a new sentence appeared. The handwriting grew slower, deeper, as though carved with terrifying patience. The school may be closed, but the class is not. The school was abandoned. From that moment on, it no longer belonged to the living. It became the territory of a teacher who had never been exonerated. Chapter 13. The Classroom of the Dead. At first, people believed they were nothing more than shared nightmares. But when the same dreams appeared in different people, at the same hour, with the same details, no one dared call it coincidence anymore. They dreamed of standing before the old school gate. It was open. No chains, no locks. The path into the courtyard was wet, as if it had just rained, though the sky in the dream was clear. With every step they took, waterlogged footprints appeared behind them, only to vanish the moment they looked back. The school bell rang. Not the familiar bell of class changes, but a deep, slow sound, like a heartbeat on the verge of stopping. Their bodies began to move on their own. No one could control their legs as they were drawn up to the second floor. Classroom 6/3 was lit. Inside, the desks were already occupied. Every figure sat with their head bowed. No one looked up. No one spoke. The blackboard was filled with chalk writing. But when they tried to read it, the letters began to run downward, melting like dried tears. On the teacher's platform stood Anong. She no longer looked as she had in life. Her skin was pale. Her teacher's uniform was worn and stained with dark patches of unknown origin. Her neck was bent sharply to one side, as if forever trapped in the moment of her death. When she turned to face the class, the air grew so cold it burned the lungs. "Lift your heads," she said. No one dared. An invisible pressure pressed down on their necks, forcing them lower. When one person tried to resist, a faint crack echoed, and they jolted awake, gasping, clutching their neck, drenched in cold sweat. In the dream, Anong called each person by name. She did not get a single one wrong. They were the names that had appeared in altered gradebooks, in hastily signed reports, in meetings where silence had been chosen over truth. Each time she finished calling a name, she drew a single line of chalk across the board, like marking an exam. "You have not finished learning," Anong said, her voice no longer angry, only hollow. "When you finish, then you may leave." Those who woke from the dream began to change. They forgot letters, forgot numbers. Some held a pen but no longer remembered how to write their own names. Others could not read street signs, though their eyes were open and clear. It was as if all the knowledge they had once gained through dishonesty was being taken back. People began to call it the classroom of the dead, a place with no recess, no dismissal bell, only lessons that were never allowed to be forgotten. And there, the teacher continued to stand at the front, until justice itself was finally answered. Chapter 14. The Final Lesson. That night, no one dreamed of the school gate. There was no bell, no dark corridor. Instead, those who remained, the ones who had signed, who had stayed silent, who had looked away, found themselves in the same dream. A classroom stood empty. No desks, no chairs, no blackboard. Only a wide space, pale and foggy, as if washed in thin mist. Anong stood at the center. She no longer looked like an enraged spirit. Her teacher's uniform was neat. Her hair was tied back at the nape of her neck, if not for the way her neck still tilted unnaturally to one side. She might have looked like a teacher about to begin class. "Today's lesson," Anong said calmly, "requires no chalk, no notebooks." Before her, the others stood in a line, their heads bowed. No one was bound, no one was forced, yet no one dared to flee. Anong walked slowly along the line, stopping in front of each face. Whenever she paused, the person before her felt their neck grow heavy, as if an invisible hand had been laid there. It did not squeeze, it only reminded. "When I spoke," Anong continued, "you did not listen. When I asked for help," her voice lowered, "you chose silence." Images appeared in the air around them, the principal's office, the rain that night, hands gripping tight, breath being cut short. There was no blood, no screaming, only panic being crushed into stillness. "What did I teach you?" Anong asked. No one answered. She turned to face them fully. There was no hatred in her eyes now, only a deep, exhausted sorrow. "I taught that truth always has a cost," she said. "But no one ever told me that the cost would be my life." For the first time, Anong fell silent for a long while. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "The final lesson is a choice. The floor beneath their feet split into two paths. One sank into darkness without an end. The other led away, faintly lit. "Confess," Anong said, "and return the truth to the living. Or remain silent and stay here, learning with me." No one knows which path they chose. All that is known is that, just before dawn, an old file was delivered anonymously to the police station. Complete signatures. Detailed statements. Not a single name missing. In classroom 6/3, the blackboard displayed one final sentence, written slowly and perfectly straight. "Class dismissed. Chapter 15. She is still there." The case was reopened years later. Newspapers called it the truth that had been buried. There were investigations, confessions, names that had once stood high quietly disappeared, from positions, from the town, from ordinary life. Everything unfolded as it should have long ago. The school, however, was never reopened. The chains on the gate were removed only once, for a final cleanup, then locked again for good. Desks were taken away, the blackboards were smashed, but classroom 6/3 remained untouched. Anyone who tried to step inside felt an unbearable weight on their neck. Their heart beat slowing, as if the air inside were thicker than the world outside. In the end, that classroom was sealed off. People thought it was finally over. But those living near the school still tell stories. On very late nights, when the wind does not blow, dogs do not bark, and the entire town sinks into an unnatural silence, a light appears again on the second floor. It is not bright, not clear, just enough to reveal a figure standing on the teacher's platform. There is no screaming, no wailing, only the sound of chalk on a blackboard, slow, steady, the rhythm of a habit that refuses to fade. Some swear that if you stand there long enough, you can hear a woman's voice whispering softly. "Sit properly. Do not lie. Do not look away." No one ever answers. Anong's mother passed away a year later. Before her death, she said she no longer dreamed of her daughter crying. In her final dream, Anong stood in the classroom with her back turned, writing a lesson on the board. When her mother called out, Anong only shook her head gently, as if to say, there is still work to be done. People say a restless spirit can move on once it has been vindicated. But some spirits choose not to leave. Not because of hatred, but because there is still something left to teach. The school is now overgrown with weeds. The roof has collapsed in places. The nameplate has rotted away. No one remembers its official name anymore. But if you pass by that place at night, do not look up at the second floor for too long. And if you hear a soft voice asking, "Have you finished learning yet?" do not answer. Because the wrong teacher does not call the innocent. She only calls those who still have something hidden in their hearts. And she is still there. The school was shut down. The truth came out. Justice was written on paper. But not every story ends with peace. Some spirits do not linger out of hatred. They stay. Because there is still something left to teach. So if one night you pass an abandoned school, and hear a soft voice asking, "Have you finished learning yet?" do not answer. Because she is still there.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.